Hey everybody, we are on part 4 of Clear Equals Kind, Essentials of Classroom Relationships. So I'm super excited to get to today's content. So many of you have requested the content in this episode and the next episodes, um, seminars, webinars. And we're just really happy to share it with you today. And in the next one, we are going to talk about real tools to put into action when those behaviors go sideways, which they do. So let's get right to it. Today, we're going to talk about several things. First, we're going to start with the idea of inner perspective. What does that mean? How can we utilize that and tap into that and make it a practice to be considering the child's inner perspective when we're trying to figure out and untangle and demystify why it is they're doing what they're doing, right? We've covered things like unmet needs and lagging skills. We've checked in our own leadership styles. We've checked in on how do I get in my own way. Here is another perspective to weave into your practice that helps you get into the mind of the child that is falling apart right in front of you. So we'll talk about that. Then we'll dive into the 4 major ways that behaviors can go sideways. Again, this is a big tip of the hat to Joanne Nordling and her work in Caring Discipline. I recommend that book and I recommend that deeper training. If you're interested, reach out to me and myself, or there are a handful of other trainers who can offer that to you as well. So from Joanne's work and her observations over decades, she started to notice patterns, right? And she noticed that behaviors can fall into one of about 4 categories. So we're going to talk about those 4 different categories and the specific approaches that you can take as the important adult in the life of that child in that moment when the behavior is happening right in front of you. So we'll talk about the 4, and today we're going to dive into the first 2: not minding behavior, what to do what it looks like, and what to do when that behavior shows up, and self-indulgent behavior. What does that look like, and what to do when that behavior shows up? We'll talk a little bit more about teaching into the lagging skills that show up. And then there's time for to set a goal. What do you plan to do by the time you finish watching this, thinking about this, writing about this? What do you plan to do before the next one? What's your plan, right? I recommend 100% that you put some of these techniques or tools in action right away so that they can weave into your practice. You can weave in what works with your own developing philosophy and your own style, so that you show up authentically for children in your classroom and out in the community, and beyond. Okay, so let's get it on. All right, quick check-in. So last week or last webinar, we talked about the ways that we get in our own way. So I invite you to pause for a moment and just think back on that. And did you have any aha moments, or did you notice anything since last time of how your sabotage, how those mud puddles show up? What does it look like? Who are the people around you, your colleagues or your mentors, who can let you know when you're doing that thing and you don't mean to, but you're getting in your own way? So I'm curious about that. I would love to hear about it. Feel free at any time to reach out to me if there's anything from any of these webinars that you have a question about, or you want to share a success story. I love to hear those. Or if you're still struggling, and we could set a time to meet and to talk and to see what else I could do to support you. Sound good? So take a pause right now and write down what it is that you noticed, your aha moments, what you learned, right? So find your pause button, hit pause, pen to paper, and then when you're ready, hit play again and we'll carry on. Okay, now we're ready to talk about inner perspective. So how difficult is it to get into the mind of other people? Sometimes it's more difficult than others. We can't figure out why in the world is this behavior happening? What the heck, right? We're saying that to our inside because we don't understand the inner perspective of that other person. right? It takes practice, it takes connection, it takes deep relationship when you know the children that you're working with and your colleagues and yourself to really get a beat on what's thinking, what are they thinking, what is the thought process, what may be the history that has kind of primed them to have that story that they make up inside their head to help figure out what's going on right here, right now. We absolutely do that as adults. We make up stories to help make sense in all sorts of aspects of our lives. And our children are doing that too, right? So it's important to figure out, listen, and accept that child's inner perspective, because their inner perspective is their reality. Whether we agree with it or it makes sense to us or not, that doesn't matter. What are they thinking? What they are thinking is their reality in the moment, right? So when we do that, it's also important to remember that we don't have to fix the problem, right? And we want to avoid trying to fix it. Just listen. And that can be hard to do when we think to ourselves, okay, I'm an educator, I'm a teacher, there are teachable moments, I'm responsible for this, it's my role to teach right now. And often when children are dysregulated, when people are dysregulated, it's really difficult to hear a fix for the problem. Oftentimes, what we want is just somebody to listen. They don't want us to fix it, just listen. The collaboration and coming up with a solution can come, but after we hear them, recognize that, and have some empathy to realize, that's really hard, or I could see how that's so confusing, or I get it, that is annoying. Pause. Let that communication and that connection land and sit for a minute so that your relationship deepens with that child and they're able to trust us more than usual and going forward, because we get them, we understand them, we actually are curious and invested in knowing what is their experience. Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to share a video with you guys. It's called Nail in the Head. Maybe you've seen it before. It's it's kind of funny, and it's applicable to our adult relationships, and it's applicable to our relationships with children. Spoiler alert, you'll see a person that has a nail in her head. It's not a real nail, it's a fake nail. So just in case you're surprised when you see it, it's okay. It's not real. You can see the glue. Okay, too many spoilers. Let's go ahead and listen.
And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. You do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail.
See, you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
Yes. Ow!
Come on. If you would just
Don't.
Right? How hard is it to not go, if you would just, right? Yeah, don't want to hear it at that point. Don't want to hear it. So here we're back. I'd like for us to take a moment. One, just soak that in. right? And imagine a time when you have been on both sides of the couch, so to speak. Have you ever had a nail in your head, or you just wanted somebody to just listen? Don't fix it. Join with me in agreeing how annoying it is that all your sweaters are snagged, right? I don't need you to fix it, right? And we've also been on the other side where we're looking in, and from our perspective, it seems like such a simple fix. Like, you got a nail in your head. I bet if we just took it out. In that moment, it's especially in moments of dysregulation, the connection is key. The fewer words, the better, right? So you noticed when the person was just listening and nodding, even though they had a story running in their head, like if they just took the nail out, everything would be fine. Being quiet and just listening is so powerful. So think about a recent time in your classroom where a child was really having a hard time and you just listened. Yeah, I know you really wanted to play kittens with them on the playground, and they ran to the other side of the playground. That's really hard. And we're thinking to ourselves, go and say, may I play? Can I join? You might know, of course they're going to say, yes, come join us. Right? No, that's really hard. Give it a moment to just let that child feel and experience that feeling. Otherwise, if we don't allow the feeling to be felt and fully experienced, then it's going to come out in other ways, and sometimes ways that are useful and helpful and kind, and sometimes not. Right. So when we can invest that time to pause a moment and be with that child when there's a big emotion, what a gift that is. Right. We can think about ourselves too. When do we want somebody to just listen? Don't have to fix it. Just agree, please, right? Okay, so now's the time to pause. So find your pause button and pen to paper. What do you think about that? Has there been a time recently for you in your classroom or with another adult where you paused and you connected and investigated and got curious and leaned in about what is their experience, what is their inner perspective? And then on the other hand, has there been a time when you've noticed, I jumped in really quickly. I went to quickly fix it. I stepped in and negotiated a conflict resolution when the children themselves are really capable in finding a resolution to a conflict. We've stepped in too soon and didn't allow the struggle to happen, didn't allow the experience of that big emotion to happen. I think all of us have done that for lots of different reasons, right? We just want everybody to be quiet. We want everybody to be kind to each other or to stop screaming, right? We're human, so we have those feelings too, right? Okay, so I'll be quiet. Push pause button. And after you finished writing, come on back and we'll keep going. All right, now we're back. Deep breath. All right. Now we're ready to step into probably what many of you have signed up for this webinar to get in the first place. Okay, those 4 hard behaviors. What do you do, right? Again, Joanne Nordling, Queen, has a lot of insight and info about this. So first, let's kind of describe each of the 4, and then we'll go into diving more deeply into not minding and self-indulgent behavior in this episode. And in the next episode, we'll talk about routine not minding and aggressive behavior. Okay, but here they are, a first wash description of all 4. So let's talk about not minding behavior. So not minding behavior is when you give a reasonable direction or a request, a declaration of what's going to happen, and the child just doesn't carry it out. There's a refusal. They turn and go the other way, or you come in and say, okay, it's time to leave, or your parent is picking you up early for a dentist appointment and it's time to put your things away and let's go, right? It may have taken them by surprise. So not minding behavior comes up when the child may not know what the expectation is, may not know exactly what's happening, right? That's different from routine not minding. Straight up not minding is when they may not be clear about what's expected or what's happening, and they just zoop, they just dip, they go, or they just refuse to put their things away and come to the door to go to their dentist appointment, right? Okay, so that's not minding behavior. Next is self-indulgent behavior. So an indicator for me that it's self-indulgent behavior is when I feel activated. Certainly, we all feel activated by all of these because, again, we're human, right? But self-indulgent behavior is whining or arguing with us, or throwing themselves on the floor, or interrupting us when maybe we're having a conversation with somebody else or with them, bickering with another person, tattletaling. Oh my gosh, that was one that my own mother would not stand for. Teachers too. Anyway, so self-indulgent behavior looks like that. Now, the third one is routine not minding, and that's different than straight up not minding, because they know what the expectation is. They refuse to do common expectations. They know their coat belongs in the cubby, or their snack dishes go in the bin, or the cloth goes into the laundry basket when they're finished. They know that, but for whatever reason, they just don't do it, right? They refuse to do what they know are common expectations, right? They know what's expected, and yet they do not. Next one is aggressive behavior. And there's a lot to talk about around aggressive behavior, because it's often misinterpreted, right? So behaviors that we immediately go, oh, that's aggressive behavior because somebody's crying or somebody got hurt, that must be aggressive behavior. Not necessarily so, okay? Or children are playing and they're rough and tumbling on the ground. Michael Gurian calls it wolf play. And again, we'll talk about that in the next episode and the importance of that kind of play, right? Okay, I won't get into it right now, but okay. So aggressive behavior are actions that deliberately try to hurt another person. And that can be complicated. It takes more connections in the frontal lobe to have an understanding of, if I do this, then that person will have an experience. If I pull my friend's hair, they will cry. I'm angry or I'm feeling a big emotion, and I pull hair because I want them to hurt, right? So aggressive behavior is when there's an intentionality, a deliberate intention to hurt another person. And it's not to be confused with boisterous play or play that happens and somebody ends up getting hurt, right? Like, you're going to put an eye out, right? Okay. So we'll talk more specifically about that one in the next episode. Okay, so before we dive into straight up not minding behavior and self-indulgent behavior, I'd like for us to pause and consider, what are those behaviors that really get you, that send you to the edge, that activate your own big emotions? A teacher I worked with many years ago shared in her description of behavior, she called them bothersome behaviors. And I gotta give her credit. That just shifted my language around how I talk about behavior. So I just want you to consider how you describe the behaviors that are happening in your classroom. Misbehaviors, naughty behaviors, bad behaviors. What do we use to talk about them, right? So bothersome to me just kind of landed in a different way, because it's a bother to somebody, either to me or to the community or to a particular person, right? So think about that. And what are the behaviors that you consider the most bothersome? What are the behaviors that just get you, right? For me, for example, it's spitting. So when a child spits on me or spits on the floor or spits on another friend, that's one that I feel immediately activated about, right? So I've done some work around that. I know what to do to maintain my own self-regulation in that moment, tapping into the inner perspective, trying to understand that behavior, giving some alternatives. all that stuff, all that work is necessary when you can determine what are the behaviors that really get you, right? So that one in particular is mine. I'm curious, what are yours? I have more than one. Spitting's not the only one that makes me go, "Urgh," right? There are, yeah, we all have different ones, right? So consider, what are your most bothersome behaviors? Maybe there are behaviors of particular children that brought you to this webinar in the first place, right? You might have a child who comes to mind immediately when we say, what is the behavior that really activates you? Okay. So if you chose to pause just then, and feel free to pause and write anytime. So I'm wondering if you did pause and wrote down those behaviors, or a particular child, or a description of what might unfold that really gets you. As we're going through these 4 different behaviors, which category would that particular behavior fall into, right? So soon you'll be able to determine, what is spitting? Which category would spitting go into? Which category would screaming go into, or that screeching, right? Or pinching, or ignoring, or running away, or dumping the trash can out. Right? Okay, so those behaviors, soon you'll be able to figure out which category it would fit into. Okay, so we're going to dive more deeply into not minding and self-indulgent behavior. Okay, let's start with not minding. So not minding, as a reminder, is when a reasonable direction, a reasonable request is made and the child refuses to carry it out, right? You say what's expected, you say what to do, and they just don't do it. Okay, so what are some examples? So examples are, the dentist appointment, right? Maybe the child doesn't realize that, oh, I'm going to be picked up before nap or after we get in from the playground. But remember, they're still figuring out that sense of time, like how long is an hour? How long is 5 minutes? They're still learning that, right? And it may come up as a surprise and they're not expecting it. So their response to that might be a not minding behavior, right? The person, their important person, shows up at the door and you go, oh, it's time to go to your dentist appointment. And they look at us and they return to play or they run over there, right? That's one example of not minding behavior. Another one might be, when you're finished with that particular puzzle, it goes back on the shelf here, right? If they're a new student, they might not remember, where does this puzzle go? I don't know. I'm kind of used to leaving my puzzles out at home or at my other school, or maybe the adults around me have sabotage that aren't supporting me with their consistency, right? So maybe they don't know exactly what the expectation is and they leave their puzzle undone on the floor, right? So that could be a not minding behavior. So take a look at your list of behaviors that really get you, and do any of those behaviors sound like not minding behavior? You'll notice that not minding behavior typically comes about with younger children or children who are entering into a new environment. So children maybe who are moving from a primary program to an elementary program, and there's so many new expectations, sharpening the pencil before you put it back in the cup for the next person. Where do I put my stuff? I'm finished with the cooking activity. Where do I hang the apron? All of those kinds of things. When there are new processes, you might see an increase or an uptick in not minding behavior because they're not quite sure what's expected, right? So that's some examples of not minding behavior. So when that happens, what do you do? Here are some tools that are super helpful. Check it out. So the first one is broken record. Broken record is just like what it sounds. It's saying what the expectation is over and over again. Again, we're going to use as few words as possible. Often when this behavior or any of these bothersome behaviors crop up, there's some amount of dysregulation for whatever reason, right? So when that happens, the fewer words the child is expected to process, the better. That's respectful of their own processing skills, right? Giving them a beat or two to respond to process what it is that we're saying, to hear, to comprehend, to process, to make a decision of what I'm going to do next. Have I had the practice in knowing what to do next? Maybe not so much. So when we broken record, we break it down into the most simple terms so it's clear what the expectation is, right? So for example, when the person comes to pick up for a dentist appointment, we'll just use that as an example. And it's time for them to put away what it is that they're working with and get their coat and their backpack and go, right? We think that's simple. That child may be deeply into their process or be really concentrating on what it is that they're doing, or are so satisfied having that time with their friend, right? So we're kind of interrupting that. We might say, your person's here, it's time to put those things away, and it's time to go. They don't do it. We shorten it up. Up. Auntie's here, time to go. They don't do it. Time to go. Put your things on the shelf. Things on the shelf. Things on the shelf. So we repeat it in the most simple terms again and again and again. Okay, and it might feel like, okay, Amy, I'm going to say this 40 times before they put that thing away. I just know it, right? And sometimes it may feel like that you're doing it that many times, right? Remember, give a pause to give them time to process, right? Understanding the younger a child is, the more time they might need to process. You're breaking it down to one or two word direction, expectations. We might even go to nonverbal, where we just point to the puzzle and then point to the shelf, to the puzzle, to the shelf, to the puzzle, to the shelf. Notice I'm aware that I might be becoming dysregulated because I've got a parent or an important person who's watching all this unfold. So ego might creep up a little bit. That's okay, because we're human. So when that happens, we have to remain regulated ourselves. Give zero emotional connection or emotional attention to that behavior, right? It's just matter of fact, puzzle goes on the shelf. Puzzle, shelf. Trying to stay as calm as possible, centered, clear, confident, sure, all of those words to describe us in our regulated state. So broken record. And then in a moment, or not a moment, but in a little bit, when we've broken record really maybe 10 times, and it feels like 40, we may need to shift to physical assist. I have a lot to say and to share about physical assist. That would be our last resort, right? If broken record really isn't helping, isn't landing for that child. So a physical assist is always done with spatula hands, never with crab claws, right? So we tuck our hands, forecasting what we're gonna do. Oh, over here, come, we're walking this way, fewer words as possible, the fewest words possible, and a guiding, firm, clear, but not harsh hand to guide them from here to there. And we'll talk about spatula hands more in depth when we talk about aggressive behavior, because physical assist may be necessary more quickly when that behavior is happening. But in this circumstance, I do want us to remember the idea that our hands are spatulas. They're flexible and not rigid. Even though we may be frustrated, that's when we calm, we go to our happy place, we regulate ourselves, and we're guiding the child with as little touch as possible, right? So the place on a person's back in between their shoulder blades, it's kind of a flat place on most people's back, right? So that is a place that you can put your hand, right? I would never recommend grasping a child like this. Wrists of young children are very delicate. And if we are even the littlest bit, the least little bit dysregulated, we won't mean to, but we may cause harm. And that's no good. So help yourself by spatula hands. A reminder around that as well is that you forecast what you're going to do. I'm going to guide you to the cubby. I'll guide you to the cubby. I'll guide you here. So you're saying what it is that you're doing before and as you're doing it, right? That goes along with what you're teaching your children about consent. You've probably had the conversation with children about nobody has permission to touch their body without your permission. And it may be that they say, you can't touch my body. I didn't give you permission to touch your body. That's right. And, puzzle, shelf, puzzle, shelf. And we can bring our body closer, right? Without the intimidating stance. We're there as partners to help them figure out what is the expectation and what it is that they can do in that moment. Okay, so physical assist. There's more to talk about there. We'll get to it next time. And the last thing to remember when not minding behavior creeps up is our mud puddles. We explored those so much last time. Go back and listen again if you want to be refreshed in that. But beware of procrastination coming up or talking. And this one's hard because broken record, for those of us who are really good at talking, can be hard because we might add in more words that complicate the situation and kind of mess with the clarity of what we are letting children know is happening, right? Okay. Let's see, negative scripting, that one can creep up as well. And have we connected with that child at neutral times ahead of time, right? That's like a practice that we keep going as long as the child is in our community. Okay, makes sense? So let's take a pause and write down some behaviors that you see in your classroom that would fall into the not minding category. What does that look like? You say what needs to be done or the expectation is set and the child just doesn't do it. Maybe they don't know exactly what the expectation is. Maybe you can write about a time when maybe you tried broken record or when that happened and your sabotage creeped in, right? Also, as you're writing, consider what is the inner perspective of that child. It might be, I don't want to put my puzzle away because I'm almost finished, or I don't want to put my puzzle away because that means I have to go to the dentist and I really don't want to go to the dentist. Or I was expecting my dad to pick me up to go to the dentist, not my aunt. Or I don't want to go. I'm having a great time with my friend and we haven't played together all day today. So there can be lots of different ideas and different realities that the child is experiencing in that moment. Okay, so I'm gonna pause, I'll be quiet, and let you put pen to paper. So find your pause button, push pause, and come back when you're finished. Okay, we're back. Deep breath. Okay, now let's talk about self-indulgent behavior. So this is when they're whining at us or when they're arguing or throwing themselves on the floor or interrupting or bickering or tattletaling, right? Those kinds of behaviors, we probably see those on the daily in our classroom, right? So it could be, it's time to go outside, or it's time to come inside from outside. I don't want to come in. I don't want to, or I never get to be line leader, or I don't want to read that book, or I don't want to I'm not sleepy. I don't need to nap, right? And that tone that comes in, and maybe it gets a little screechy and our ears are, right? So we're becoming dysregulated. Okay. We're the important adults. We're grown-ups, we can regulate because we've practiced, right? Yeah. So when whining happens, or two children are arguing about a particular ball they both want, or a particular color of paint or crayon that they want, or something happens and they throw themselves on the floor. They might throw themselves on the floor in a tantrum or in a meltdown, and those are different, right? So a tantrum, they're still able to listen, they're still connected to their frontal lobe, they can still process information. They might follow us when we walk away from the collapsed body on the floor. They'll come behind us and fall in front of us again. Y'all ever had that happen? And it's hard, but you don't laugh at that point. Okay, interrupting. We might be having a conversation with our co-teacher or with another adult or another child, and a child comes and just starts talking in our face. Has that ever happened? Having a conversation with my young friend Ashley here, and Cohen comes and puts his face right in between us at my face. Have you ever had that happen and you kind of feel the spittle on your face? A memory is coming to mind, and I was like, oh, I've just caught a cold right then. Okay, anyway, so interrupting when you're trying to have a conversation or when you are focused on something, right? Bickering, tattletaling, right? Those behaviors crop up. So what are some examples? It may be that you see on your list that you made a little bit ago about the most bothersome behaviors for you, the ones that send you to the edge, might fall into this category of self-indulgent behavior, right? So what do you do when that happens? Okay, this is a tough one, y'all, because often self-indulgent behaviors can be really annoying, and we want them to stop screaming or stop whining or stop bickering. We just want them to stop. That's okay. And the hardest thing to do is to ignore that behavior, right? So we talked a little bit before about the importance of not giving emotional attention to behaviors we don't want to see anymore, right? Give no emotional attention, right? That means we stay regulated and we don't get jacked up alongside them, okay? So when self-indulgent behavior happens, the first line of defense, the first tool you could use is to ignore that behavior, right? So the whining is happening in our ear and we continue to carry on. There's an interruption that's happening and we continue our conversation, right? We might have a tool or technique that you can use to let that child know, I know you're here. I'm going to talk to you in just a bit, in just a moment, but I'm going to finish this conversation. Right? Note to self, sticky note to remember. That's a lagging skill in that child to know how to interrupt. What is the interrupting rule, right? If it's a safety thing and somebody is hurt or bleeding or, right, then that is an important time to interrupt, right? So teach your child, your children, the appropriate times to interrupt and what to do when they want our attention right then, or they have something important to say, or they have a really big question that's so important to them in that moment. So it might be that you let children know, hey, when I'm having a conversation and you want to say something to me, you can put your hand on my shoulder, or you can grab hold of the bottom of my sweater, or put your hand on my leg. And I will respond to that by putting my hand on your hand. And that will let you know, I know you're here, I got you, and I'll be with you in just a moment, right? It could be that you let them know, you teach them, you can go stand on that line at my chair. I know that you need some help or you have a question. I'll get to you as soon as I finish with this child. I'm giving a lesson over here. I'm giving a presentation over here. I know you need me because you're over by my chair. So as soon as I get back there, how can I help, right? When you're available. That kind of role modeling helps children understand boundaries, and they will be able to learn that as well. So when you ignore that behavior, that self-indulgent behavior, it lets the child know that you're not available to tend to that in that moment. Again, if it's a safety thing, then of course, that's an appropriate time to interrupt if it's safety, okay? Let's see. Yeah, that's what I want to say about that. Okay, if they continue to get in our space or they're still learning about boundaries. And I'm continuing my conversation and I'm hearing Miss Amy, Miss Amy, Miss Amy. And then their face gets in between. Remember the story I told you about Cohen? He had the spit on my face. That happened. Remember, that's an activator for me. So that was a tricky few moments there. And I'm trying to ignore that behavior. When this self-indulgent behavior has an impact on others, that's when you can turn, give an either or choice. You can either hold my hand or you can wait for me at my chair. You can either stand beside me here or stand beside me here. You can either go to a table or go to a rug. Give some choices that are both okay for you and the community, right? So when that is self-indulgent behavior, doesn't really have an impact on others, ignore, give it zero emotional attention. When it begins to have an impact on others, when they're screeching, you can see other children are doing this or they're going, stop, and it begins to escalate. That's when you see that behavior is having an impact on others. Give a choice, right? You can either do this or this. Remember, fewer words, the better. Okay, so either or choice. Now, sometimes behaviors can be a little slippery. So it could be that this self-indulgent behavior slips into not minding, or routine not minding, or even aggressive behavior. When those behaviors slip from one to another, and that can happen, right? When you have lots of practice with this and you've studied this and you've put it into action, right? You'll be able to shift your approach as their behavior shifts from one type of behavior to another. I'm telling you, you'll feel so confident when that happens. You'll feel like a superhero, like I'm the best in the world. It's a great feeling. So your agility in being able to switch your approach when the behaviors shift will come over time, all right? So you would switch to broken record if the behavior slips into not minding, right? Now, as with all the other difficult, bothersome behaviors, we want to be aware of our mud puddles. Are we procrastinating? Are we talking? Are we negative scripting? Have we forgotten to connect at neutral times for that child? So be aware that your mud puddle might creep up, especially if the behavior causes a dysregulation in yourself, right? Okay, so let's pause and write. You probably have some behaviors that come to mind when you're thinking about self-indulgent behavior. What are those? What do you see frequently in your classroom that you would go, yep, that's self-indulgent? Are there particular children who maybe offer a constellation of different types and variations of self-indulgent behavior? So take a moment, find your pause button, and write those behaviors down, right? I also recommend that you write those behaviors down and then right underneath it, write what it is that you can do. You can ignore it, that's easy, right? Well, it's not easy in the moment. It gets easier with practice. What would be an appropriate either or choice if you have to move to that? If that behavior that you wrote down is causing an impact on others. Go ahead and brainstorm, write them down, come up with solutions and ideas of what would be either or choices that you could go to, right? So that when that happens, you don't have to be thinking, what is an appropriate either or choice right here? You got it on the top of your mind, okay? So find your pause button, pause, and put pen to paper, and when you're ready, come on back. Okay, now we're back. Let's talk about, we're shifting gears here a little bit. And maybe you've noticed that the child has some lagging skills. They may not know exactly how to interrupt, or you haven't had that lesson or given that presentation about how to, you can put your hand here, or you can wait by my chair, or you can put your hand here on my leg, or you can put your hand in my hand, something like that. What is it that maybe they don't know yet? So you've noticed some lagging skills. What do you do? So you've got some options. The first one, an important one, is to investigate, be curious, listen, and accept the child's inner perspective, right? That's key, right? For so many instances where a child is showing us that they're struggling, right? And then in our next session, we're going to talk about the other options that you have when children have lagging skills. What can you do to adjust the environment? And what kind of problem solving skills can you teach, either through role modeling or role play, or through books, or through conversations, or through true stories that you tell? We get really creative in the way that we teach these problem solving skills. Like we can be creative when we take a look at our environment and see what it is that we can do to shift and adjust how the child interacts with the environment. Okay. So we're nearing the end of this particular recording. So are there any questions that pop up? Are there any particular situations that you want help with now? You know how to reach me, amywilliamsacademy@gmail.com. We can certainly set up a time for coaching, or if you want to dive more deeply into what it is that we've talked about in this episode, happy to do that. Also, happy to hear what works. And I'd love to hear stories, anecdotes about, okay, this was bothering everybody. I shifted from ignoring to either or, and it worked like a charm. Love to hear those stories. Okay. So now, what is one thing that we talked about today that you plan to do in the coming weeks, right? So this is your professional action plan. Write that down. Push pause here if you want to, and just write it down. Put a date on it. By the next time I watch the next webinar, I'm going to have recognized and noticed those types of behaviors. I'm going to have talked with my co-teacher or my teaching team about not minding and self-indulgent behavior and what those might look like, and what do we do when that happens. I shared that with other people. Okay, so go ahead and write it down. Put a date on it when you plan to do that thing. All right, so push pause here if you need to. If not, we carry on. And again, here are books that you can use to address those behaviors. Some of these are social stories that I have repeated over and over again with classrooms who were really struggling with how to ask a friend to play instead of tackling your friend. Here's what you could do instead, right? There's a book about consent. So as we were talking about spatula hands, consent kind of dips into that sometimes an adult may have to put their hands on us to keep us safe. So that book addresses that kind of thing. Then, of course, Wow, That Was a Big Emotion is about regulating big emotions. Rude, Mean, and Bullying, what is that? That's about the different kinds of behaviors that might creep up in the classroom that can cause harm intentionally or not intentionally, and the role of the upstander. What does that look like? How can you cultivate more of that in your classroom community? And then the Spark is a creative journal for educators. So I want to thank you so much for being here with us today. I do want to say today, right now, that I recognize how it can be difficult to carve out time to sit down, eliminate distractions, and listen and learn something new, or come up with questions and try to figure out the answers, or to try something new with a new technique in your classroom to try to help support the children in the way that's the most supportive for the community that you serve. So I know it's a big ask and it's a big investment of your time, and I'm honored that you're inviting me to share that with you. So I just want to recognize that. Thanks for joining me. Here are the ways to reach me and to connect with me. Follow me on Instagram, on Facebook. There's my website and my email. So feel free, reach out, follow me. I'm always putting up something. I'm always thinking about something. All right, have a good one, and I'll see you the next time.